It's no secret that Britain is slowly dying. At the very moment that we're importing millions more mouths to feed, the very lifeblood of our nation is being drained. The burden becomes ever greater, right as hostile powers chip away at our very foundations. It seems inevitable by the laws of nature that this simply cannot go on. Is collapse coming? What form will it take? Can we even do anything to stave it off or prepare? Watch this to find out. This is the coming demographic apocalypse. I suppose I should start off by saying that throughout history there have been many conceptions of an apocalypse. Aliens, civil war, judgment day, invasions, or what have you. In this video I don't mean any of them. Instead I mean technological collapse. But first, a little bit on demographics and the Civil War. Various people, including David Betts, have been talking a lot about civil war recently. The claim roughly goes that the demographic situation's getting worse and worse, the economic situation's getting worse and worse, so we shall inevitably see some sort of large-scale backlash against immigration in the next 5 to 10 years. I reckon that some level of civil unrest is inevitable. In fact, we've seen that already with Southport and various other riots. But I don't believe in all-out civil war. As I explained in this video, civil war will not happen. Civil wars will only happen if you have an organised elite minority with both the resources and will to organise and fund a civil war. At the moment, I don't believe there's any faction that could and would do such a thing, so I don't believe there will be civil war. As for demographics, yes, things are dire. In fact, I talked about that myself in this video. But in contrast to that, I don't believe in the idea that demographics are destiny, as I talk about in this video. Instead, I think that, yes, although it's going to be terrible for our people, and, I want remigration like anyone else, I think that history hinges far more on the individual actions of great men, or even lesser men, and, of course, factions of elite organised minorities. The demographic question does pose a challenge, and of course will influence the future of our nation, but I don't think it's the primary causal factor, and if by some way we were to attain power and were to become the ruling elite, then I think the demographic question could reasonably easily be dealt with. Anyway, with that aside, I move on to the actual apocalypse. Now, when I talk about technological collapse, ironically that is quite a complex subject. If I am to properly explain it though, I think I need to go through 4 prerequisite ideas. These are the skills collapse, increasing technological complexity, the offshoring of industry, and the mass import of millions more mouths to feed. First, on skills collapse. I'm sure that anyone who's older than the age of 18 has noticed that the quality of people in the workforce has been getting worse and worse. Many complex systems are run by engineers in their 50s or 60s, and it's by no means clear who will replace them. And you see it in schooling, university, and many other aspects of life. Yes, more people are going to university, but what they're learning there is utter crap. The education is not what it used to be, the skills are not what they used to be, and then the other thing is that we're far more reliant on help from the internet. Not just Google, but now even things like ChatGPT. Whereas before, a programmer probably understood what he was doing, these days a lot of code is written with the help of AI. The question must be asked as to whether these people would manage without the AI. I don't think they'd be able to do as good of a job. So no, in various aspects of life, simple tasks are becoming worse and worse, maintenance is not being done properly, things are not really improving, not even being maintained, but gradually getting worse and worse, becoming more and more strained, and eventually there will be a breaking point. Then, at the same time of all this, you have increasing technological complexity. Right as the average person is getting dumber and dumber, and yes, they are getting dumber and dumber, you're not imagining it, technology is becoming increasingly more complex. In the short term, this is, definitely to our benefit, but with people relying more and more on Google, ChatGPT, or things like this, we're getting further and further from people understanding what they're actually doing. Or take the example of Windows. The earliest guys working on Windows, from the chip level to the user interface level, understood every process in between, at least in their department. But can you honestly say that of anyone now? Yes, we've increased more and more complexity, allowing us to do more and more things, but our ability to fix things when they get broken is also getting worse and worse. We simply do not understand what we're working with. Or you can even take the examples of logistics. It used to be that our food was grown locally, our goods were made locally, and distribution was no more complex than, the individual manufacturers or farmers or what have you, just bringing their stuff to market and selling them there. Nowadays, however, it's a very complex system, and when you're working with things that have, literally tens of thousands of parts, it's just too much to keep track of. If a lot of things go wrong all of a sudden, then, you're probably left in a position where you don't know how to get these parts, you don't know how to replace what you're missing. And so, whilst for now we can just about keep up with things, it's becoming more and more difficult to do so, and it wouldn't take much for it all to go wrong. And then, speaking of our last example, we have the offshoring of industry. This country created the Industrial Revolution. We used to have a globe-spanning empire to bring in raw materials to produce finished goods here. We used to be self-sufficient agriculturally, we used to have masses of industry, we were arguably the #1 producer. Yet these days, much of that real economy has been offshored, or it's just been shut down, we've not replaced it, and, we're not self-sufficient anymore. The food we get from farming cannot support our population. I think it's something like around 50% of our food is imported. You can imagine that when that goes tits up, then, we're simply fucked. We simply cannot manage. And it's not just food, it's other things. It's electricity, it's gas and oil, it's finished goods, it's basic things that we rely on to survive. We don't make it in enough quantity here, we rely on imports. And if, for whatever reason, those imports can't keep coming, if, let's say we have a disaster at the ports, or there's a breakout of a war, even in World War II we had to do rations, but things have got far worse since then. Simply speaking, our industrial capacity and food production cannot support the population of this country. And, I'm not trying to be one of those people who think that, we've got too much overpopulation in the world. I don't really believe that's true. I think if things were managed correctly, we could support our domestic population, but things are not managed correctly. They're managed either maliciously or incompetently. It's as though our government doesn't conceive of any thought of a war that would stop our imports. But, if there is an unforeseen disaster that means that things have to shut down, then, we're simply screwed. What would you do if the internet went down, the electricity cut out, the shops stopped being refilled, there was no more petrol at the fuel garage, and the water stopped flowing through the taps? What would you do? What is your plan? The answer for, I dare say, 99.9% of this country is that there is no plan. People will rely on whatever food stores they have and just hope that things blow over. But if things do not blow over, then they don't know how to hunt, they don't know how to defend themselves, and many people, especially in densely populated urban environments, simply wouldn't survive. And then, stupidly, at the same time that all of this is happening, we're importing millions and millions more mouths to feed. Mouths who, according to these graphs, aren't even economically beneficial. These people are a net drain on this country, they really shouldn't be here, and yet we're importing them and increasing the burden on ourselves more and more and more. In our overly complex internet-reliant society, it really wouldn't take too much to topple the whole thing. I mean, if you look at the picture I've been building up, skills collapse, technological complexity, offshoring of industry, and millions more mouths to feed, what have we built? Oh, of course, it's the Tower of Babel. This is not a recipe for success. We have been flying too close to the sun, we have been building too tall without solid foundations, and now our government are chipping away at the foundations. This is not sustainable, this is not stable. Really, it wouldn't take too much for the whole thing to come collapsing down. And if, or dare I say when it does, there will be a mass famine of bubonic proportions. Most people probably will not survive. People do not have the skills, the knowledge, or even the resources to survive. The country, without the complex mechanisms of modern society, cannot support our population. Even now, things are not looking good. We have papers like this, even though I think they're bullshit, saying that we cannot maintain things as they are unless we import millions and millions more migrants. But these millions of migrants eventually grow old themselves, and as I've shown in the two graphs, these migrants are a net drain to society. For most of their lives, they are not net contributors. So you're in the position where, if you want to save the pensions, you need to import millions and millions of more to support the millions more. We have not just built the Tower of Babel, we're building an economic Ponzi scheme. Most likely, collapse will come, and if it does, it'll be on a scale never seen before in this country. Now, having said that, this would actually be the greatest trial in a Darwinian sense for our nation. Only the smart, strong, and, if you're a woman, the beautiful, will survive such a challenge. I know that this is not a nice way to think about things, but through this trial, we would get rid of all the idiots, all those who can't fend for themselves, and we would be left with far stronger, smarter, fitter men. But at the moment, there is still a real question about who would survive in such an apocalypse. Do you think that you would survive in the apocalypse? Do you think you have what it takes? At the same time as releasing this video, I'll also release a video about how to survive in such an apocalypse. So for as little as £2, that could be available for you to watch, along with many other things. But at the moment, as far as I can see, we have not done any of the necessary preparation to survive such a thing. We are totally reliant on complex society. We don't have the networks of people. We don't even have essentially the will to carry on. The things that would be necessary to survive are things that currently would be seen as, beyond the pale would be putting it lightly. They'd be seen as awful atrocities. And, unless you're prepared to do these things, then you won't survive. And I don't think many people in this country are prepared to do these things. We don't even have things like local industry, strong local communities, strong networks of friends or other people who could and would support each other in such a crisis. In fact, the only groups I see that, to a large extent, do have these networks are South Asian communities, Pakistanis, Indians, Punjabis, whatever have you. These people still have very strong clan networks that, operate kind of in spite of liberal democracy. So, as soon as liberal democracy collapses, potentially they'd be better off. Now, at the same time, a lot of their wealth comes from benefits leeching, so maybe they won't be so good after all. But the point is that if we want to survive, if we want to be the ones that win, which is an absolute necessity, then we must build our own networks, our own industry, things for us that don't rely on complex society, that would survive a collapse, that aren't too reliant on computers or technology or whatever have you. Only these things can and will survive. And if we don't have backups, say, even if we have our farm, but all the farm equipment uses highly specialized engineering products, very complex parts and programs, if we're not able to fix these things, then, we'll still be in the shit too. We need things that are local enough and simple enough, and we need people who are skilled enough to understand them, such that if shit really did hit the fan, if the international trade, international finance, and international technology of the world all suddenly came to a halt, we need things that survive that can keep enough of us going, such that we will come out of such an apocalypse, battered, wounded. It'll still be awful, but we need to be able to survive. The other thing to mention, of course, is that if such a collapse were to happen in this country alone, then the only outcome would be de facto subjugation by a foreign state. If, however, that isn't the case, and such a phenomenon is effectively global, then, again, this isn't a nice way to think about it, but potentially that is a great reset. Not a great reset a la World Economic Forum, but one in which things aren't planned, things aren't controlled, and it's kind of a reset back to the more naturalistic, more savage lifestyles in which, our ancestors evolved to survive in. We'd have to dispense with all the modern moral bullshit and live in a world where it's survival of the fittest once again. And no, you would no longer be in a world where you can trust all your neighbours are of the same ethnic stock as you. We'd be in a competing world with different ethnic factions, different power factions. It really wouldn't be pleasant, and we really have to be on our game. If we weren't to do this, we would not survive as a people, and we must survive as a people. Just how likely any of this is to happen is something I leave up to you, but if we carry on in the way we have been, then those chances are increasing more and more. Eventually it will become inevitable. The more temporarily comfortable outcome would be slow and steady decline, but that's looking less and less likely compared to total collapse. In any case, that's about all for this video. Please let me know what you think. Please let me know if you have a plan and what that would be, and whether you think you'd be able to survive. Other than that, I wish you all the best. Check out my Discord, my Twitter, like and subscribe, do whatever else is in the description. Up to you. Have a nice day. I'll see you later. Cheerio.